So this video continues from the previous. Okay, so focal points. Focal points are a type of dominance. The focal point is the focus of your work. So in Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim Museum, which I've misspelled, I swear I just don't see this until I get away from it. The dominant tower stands out from the rest of the building because of its size and shape. And created quite a controversy at the time that it was built because buildings were expected to be boxes. It remains an architectural icon because of that focal point. So the focal point is the element that attracts the eye first and more than anything else on the page. And when you're dealing with architecture, especially in a city, you're competing with all the other buildings. How do you stand out? Create a focal point. Now, you also don't want to make it so dominant that obscures everything else. And he almost kind of did that here because you really don't notice the rest of the building for a few minutes. The High Museum in Atlanta actually has that. If you go on the inside of the building, it has that same concept on the inside of it. Your focal point is the starting point for telling the story that you're telling. And yes, you're telling a story when you're designing a residence. And in fact, I will cover this in more detail, but I implore you all to come up with stories about the journey that you're taking as you go through the design. Barcelona Pavilion by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe has a red onyx focal point that creates entry point into the design and the building itself. And it tells the story. Your focal point attracts the viewers or the users to the first place you want them to look. This is how you start a conversation with your audience. And if you start a conversation with your audience, you start a conversation with your users, they will enjoy the journey through your building way more than if you don't. And I just have to tell you, somebody who has been in this industry for a very long time, this is one of the most important things that if I can get you guys to understand this, I think is one of the most important things that is not taught very well, or at least it's not communicated very well when it is taught. That storytelling is the basis of all design. We humans are natural storytellers. And I'm going to start to go off on a tangent, and I don't want to do that. I want to come back to this later. Because I feel like I want to cover what these things are first and identify them and then explain why they relate. But storytelling is paramount to good design. So without an entry point into your design, viewers will have a harder time trying to figure out their way into your design. They'll have to try to think about, where do I go? And, if somebody's going somewhere for the first time, say they're going to a job interview at this library, or this is art museum, looks like a library to me for some reason. And they're going to a job interview and they can't figure out how to get in the building. Now they're going to be nervous, and your design may have made them botch up their interview. Not literally, but you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's very clear how to get in this building. It makes you enjoy the building more. If people hate your building, it's not really a good thing. It's not our goal. A lack of an entry point will increase the cognitive load on your audience, and they may walk away. Don't let them struggle. Provide an entry point into your design. So areas of interest, through emphasis or difference within the composition, capture and hold the viewer's attention. It brings them into the design. In this case, it's very, very clear. It's the only circular element on the page. And so that's the starting point into this campus. And then from there, you're going to now use leading lines to lead your audience. Because once people get brought in, then they're going to look for what's next. They're looking for the sequence. And the sequence is, now we're going to start moving around this campus. Contrast is a good way to create an area of interest. Anything that can be contrasted and anything that can have visual weight added to it or direction can be used to create a focal point in the exact same way that it can be used to create a dominant element. The difference is just simply a matter of degree. How many levels of dominance can you realistically have in a design? 3 is a good number. 3 is almost always a good number, as people can generally perceive 3 levels of dominance. We want to work with the human brain's ability to see things. And you can see here, there are 3 levels of dominance in these buildings. So what that tells me when I look at this is that there are 3 different areas. So maybe the one in the middle is where I need to go, and it being distinct helps me wayfind. As opposed to if this was one giant building that all looked the same, this breaks down a large building into 3 levels of dominance to help direct people. You could create more than 3, but it will reduce the contrast between the neighboring levels and make it harder for people to see what's going on. And it's possible for different people to look at a composition and think that different elements are focal points, and that you can't really control. But this is a great example of what not to do. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about how if you emphasize everything, you emphasize nothing. Everything here is considered important, and so now everything's fighting with each other. It's also way too much on that scale of that building. As you design distinct levels of dominance, you create visual hierarchy in the design. And ideally, it will match the concept of your conceptual hierarchy in your content. Wow, look at all those typos. If it's a building storefront, it's more important than its upper levels, then it should be more visually dominant. So you have to say what is the most important. You have to determine the hierarchy. You have to establish what it is that you want to communicate. Because if you don't, then you won't. Okay, so in summary, you can't emphasize everything. In order for some elements to stand out, other elements have to fade into the background. So by varying their visual weight and the visual direction, you can establish different levels of dominance that will first bring people into your design and then help guide them through it. Ideally, 3 levels of dominance are what most people can discern, or less. More starts to make it complicated and hard. By designing different levels of emphasis or dominance, you'll create a visual hierarchy in your design so that you will help lead people through by communicating quickly and efficiently, and they will appreciate you for it. And references. Okay, and so we will stop here and continue in the next lecture series.